bomber, the body scanners, the police state, 9/11, how he was gagged from being able to talk to the public about what he knew, how he was persecuted. He's Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer, of course, of Able Danger fame. You've seen him on television many, many times, and he is with us again for the next 30 minutes or so. Colonel Shaffer, it's great to have you here with us.
Well, thanks. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad that we got in touch with each other. There's so much going on, and I could go over your bio, but for those that may not know who you are, recap who you are and your experience with trying to stop 9/11 and then your persecution.
Right. Well, to put it all in kind of a nutshell, I'm a case officer by trade, trained by CIA years ago, a lot of years ago. My primary job with the Department of Defense was to conduct human intelligence operations, which the public commonly knows as espionage. I did that for about 20 years, and my specialty was special operations support, direct support special operations. So while I wasn't necessarily a Green Beret, I spent a lot of time with them, supporting them, and then doing things in what's known as the black world, the black operations world. And of course, within the context of that, I did a lot of it both as an Army civilian, as an Air Force civilian, and also as a Defense Intelligence Agency civilian. All along, I was an Army reservist, and a lot of the stuff I would do and still continue to do is as an Army reservist. And so the primary focus of all of that work, frankly, was going after hard targets, going after the real challenges of the country, the North Koreans, the Iranians. I did a lot of work on things like counter-drug back when we were actually focusing on counter-drug back in the 90s. And it all kind of culminated in the late 90s, at least from my perspective, in a project called Able Danger. And Able Danger was essentially an entrepreneurial concept that was brought up by General Hugh Shelton, who was then chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who tasked General Schoonmaker, the then commander of Special Operations Command, to bring together a group to really do out-of-the-box thinking, to take a clean sheet of paper, if you will, and try to see what would be possible to go after a transnational, and what we mean by transnational is something that does not sit in one single country, a transnational threat, which back then was the then blossoming threat of Al-Qaeda. And it was very innovative. We tried to put together a hybrid team of folks from Defense Intelligence, which was my element, something called Stratus Ivy. We were a special mission task force, along with technology and support of the Army Land Information Warfare Activity, which was doing some very advanced data mining, which was then being funded by Representative Kurt Weldon. There was a great interest by Congress to try to actually do some things with new technology, all on behalf of the Special Operations Command, who had the charter, who was tasked by General Shelton and General Schoonmaker to try to find ways to go after Al-Qaeda. And again, it's notable here, Alex, that this was all pre-9/11. This was all done 98, 99, 2000. And it was a very advanced, for the time, data mining effort. That was a lot of people don't understand, that was just one part of it. The actual components, the larger moving pieces, if you will, were never really brought to light during the Able Danger hearings and everything else. And I will talk about that a little bit more in the book when the book comes out. Right now it's going to review, so I'm not sure what's going to make it through completely, but the idea here...
You're having to get, for those that don't know, national security view, overview and release authorization from what, the Department of Defense, CIA?
Oh, no, from Army. Since I'm an Army body, and I was actually on active duty with the Army during the time that I was conducting the operations in Afghanistan. And this book is going to focus primarily on Afghanistan, the dark side of the force. And it has to do with my work there, working as part of Task Force 180 and Task Force 121. I was actually attached to 121, which is General McChrystal's command in Afghanistan back in 03 and 04. And it goes into a fairly good detail about how we were doing things, and frankly, we're portraying it clearly as the tipping point in Afghanistan. We've been able to, a lot of the folks I worked with have collaborated. I was assigned to something called the Leadership Targeting Cell, the LTC. We had good cooperation, excellent cooperation from my colleagues on that. And so we've been able to kind of go through and detail. It's kind of an action adventure, in that I think the readers will like it by the fact I try to tell it from the first person, much like the Martin Sheen character, the Captain Willard character in Apocalypse Now. It's almost, and you can probably appreciate this from your perspective, Alex, the insanity of seeing bureaucracy in action. And a large part of the focus is kind of give people a feel for what it was like to have to deal with not only the enemies that are shooting at you, but your own enemies who are behind the wire, who just really don't want to do the right thing. And so we try to portray this fairly, and it'll be focused primarily on my work in Afghanistan. But,
well, we're going to talk about that one, and I'm looking really forward to a full-hour interview with you when The Dark Side of the Force comes out, and find out who the Emperor Palpatine is in this story. But expanding, you then tried to tell the 9/11 Commission and Congress this info, and then they began to persecute you. Why was that?
Well, it's interesting how it all kind of popped up. And the book will only talk about the initial disclosure, and it'll end kind of with me being pulled off the front line after my second deployment to Afghanistan. But my initial disclosure came directly to Dr. Philip Zelikow, who was the then chair of the 9/11 Commission. And what I just told you and your audience is what I told him. But in about an hour's worth of briefing, where I lay out all the bones of the operation, I lay out everything from who was involved, what was the focus. I talked about some clandestine operations which were related to it, which we were using to support the targeting effort. And of course, one of the things which drew total silence and shock when I brought it up was the fact that we discovered 3 of the 9/11 hijacker cells. We discovered 3 of the 4 cells of the 9/11 attacks. And it was, total shock and dismay by the people in the room, to include Dr. Zelikow. And then during that initial disclosure, he pulls me aside at the end of that meeting, and at Bagram, this happened in October of 2003, and gives me his card and says, what you said today, and I'm going to quote as accurately as I remember, and I think this is directly from my testimony, what you said today is very important. We need to continue this dialogue. I need you to contact me upon your return to the United States. And at which time I explained to him, well, I'm actually undercover here, so I'm going to have to give you, my real name is something else. I will, contact your staff when I get back. And it was during that time, between October and February and January, frankly, something happened. And to me, there's still a mystery of what exactly happened. But sure enough, I followed up, contacted his staff, and all of a sudden they don't want to talk to me. Even though what I said there at Bagram, they were very, very shocked, very interested. And I was told after talking to his staff twice, and I'll quote as accurately as I remember it, we don't need you to come in. We have all the information on Able Danger that we need, unquote. And that's kind of when things started going wrong, and I really didn't know why. Next thing I know, my clearance is suspended, and I'm pulled off the front line, despite the fact I received the Bronze Star, was sent back a second time to plan a surge operation for another surge to go after bin Laden, and I was pulled off over what can only be what would only be described as petty issues, and I'll go through them briefly.
Well, hold on before you do that, Colonel Shaffer. We also have Farmer, one of the head lawyers for the commission, saying there was a cover-up going on within the commission. We see them persecuting you. We see them, tell us what happened to you in the persecution, but then what do you think about Sybil Edmonds' testimony that she was listening to communiques where elements of the CIA were communicating with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and knew about their movements, thanks to the intel you and others were gathering, right up until the moment of 9/11.
Well, I tend to believe that there's a great deal of truth to that, and then there's a couple things I want to add to that to back up your point. First, when I was in closed hearings, when I was getting ready to go into closed hearings on the Hill back in 2000, I'm going fast forward here a little bit, but in 2006 when I was in closed hearings, Representative Sylvester Reyes himself comes up to me. And as you know, Sylvester Reyes is now, I believe, the chair of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And Representative Reyes comes up and says, Colonel Shaffer, I know there's something to what you're saying because Dr. Zelikow came and approached me in January of 2006 and 2004 and said, there's something called Able Danger. We think it's promising. We'll get back to you on that. And frankly, they never got back to him. So this is one of the senior Democrats coming to me and saying they told us about it, but then they never followed up. So I do believe something happened internally. And I've talked to a couple of the 9/11 Commission folks. I can't go into a lot of detail. They've asked me not to give out their names, but frankly, one of the 9/11 commissioners told me personally everybody was covering for someone within that commission. That is to say that everybody who was a commissioner had an agenda. And
but what about Sybil Edmonds saying she was